Islam Moors? Please be seated. Arise, giving all praises to Allah, the Father of the universe, cherisher and sustainer of all the boundless universes. Allah is the author, creator, the governor of the worlds, the almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible. All praises are due to Allah. Islam Moors? We extend the highest of honors to his holy divine prophet, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America, a savior of humanity. Islam? We extend high honors as well to the Honorable Mosiah Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who did indeed warn and stir up the nations. Islam? Give high honors as well to the Moorish flag. The red flag with the green 5-pointed star in the center. The 5 points representing love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, the highest, 5 highest principles known to man. Islam? Giving honors to the American flag, with stars and stripes. This flag exists as a constant reminder that the European owes you the Moors with compound interest. Islam? This is also the flag of our birth. We extend further honors to the noble Sheik staff, noble Vanguard staff who keep the peace, and we give honors to you, the Eels and Bays, for without you there is no Moorish movement. Islam? How's everyone on the holy night? All praises are due to Allah. Tonight, Moors, we're gonna demonstrate the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Islam? We have to remember anytime we gather, when our flags are hoisted, when our charter is raised, when the charter is unveiled and placed out in public eye, we must remember that at all times we must demonstrate, exercise our 5 senses when we are able to do so. Islam? We must remember that we must stand on the short foundation stone that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali has laid us. Islam? Because if we get off that, if we go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, we'll find ourselves back in Negro, black, and color at either step. Islam? The state that the Prophet found us, right, was the Prophet referred to as the slime of life, the unwholesome depths of poverty, right? Poverty not just in an economic sense, but those who are poor in spirit, poor of mind, poor in the image of self. Islam? This is the stage that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali found us. Islam? Anytime we in the Moorish Science Temple of America gather, this is the man we come to honor. Look at him, boys. Islam? See, you know Harriet Tubman, may peace be upon that sister. You know Frederick Douglass, may peace be upon that brother. You've heard of Sojourner Truth. You know, they made a movie called Birth of a Nation, so you've heard about Nat Turner. Islam? We've even heard about our forerunner, Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, right? But one name that you haven't heard when you were growing up is the name of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. You must wonder why this man's name has been kept out of your history. You must wonder why this man's legacy has been kept out of your minds and your children's minds. Islam? The labors that he demonstrated, Moors, in 16 short years, right, set up a Moorish, divine, and national movement that we still demonstrate on today. Islam? The divine constitution and bylaws of the Moorish Science Temple of America was enacted in the year 1928, right? Act 2, which mentions that Friday is our holy day of rest, was, enshrined on that, in that year, right? Here we are in 2017, still obeying the orders of our prophet. We're generations out. We're 4 to 5 generations out from the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. We've raised children on this. See, a lot of times, Asiatics who grab the Moorish movement on the internet, right? They grab it because of a get-rich-quick scheme, or something that you don't have to do, some form of exemption. Islam? But if you're a citizen, and the Prophet returned that word to us, because that was taken away from us. If you're a citizen, it's not about what you don't do, it's about what you have to do. Islam? On the bottom of our nationality card, the Prophet instructs us to proclaim, I am a citizen of the USA, Noble Drew Ali, the Prophet. Islam? So we must get in line with citizenship. We must obey the edicts of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and those laws that was enacted by the grand body as well as the supreme body. Islam? That being the case, I'd like to draw from the Charter of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Because you won't know how to move as a Moorish American if you don't know the guidelines. If you don't know the landmarks that said the masterminds traced themselves back and thus they're able to know. Islam? So reading our charter, right, of Temple number 19 here in Atlanta, Georgia. Charter, Moorish Science Temple of America. To all those whom these presents may come, greetings, the Home Office. By virtue of the authority vested in the most holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, and the Moorish Science Temple of America, by a lawfully granted charter of the state of Illinois, have granted this charter to this branch of the Moorish Science Temple of America at 394 Cleveland Avenue in the county of Fulton in the state of Georgia, to be styled and known as Moorish Science Temple of America, number 19, invested with all the powers and privileges of a subordinate temple within the jurisdiction of the said Home Office. Hear ye, jurisdiction aforesaid by virtue of whose authority it exists, while acting in conformity with the laws, rules, and regulations of the home temple and the subordinate temple aforesaid, being duly and lawfully organized, constituted, and established, is hereby authorized and empowered to initiate and confer the degrees of the said temple in accordance with the established forms and usages upon all such persons as are duly and lawfully and practice the teachings of all the true and divine prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, etc. The officers and members who benefit under this charter do hereby pledge themselves to act at all times in obedience to the commands and edicts of the illustrious Noble Drew Ali, the founder and head of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The Home Office can at any time suspend, revoke, or take away this charter or warrant of authority if, in the judgment of our grand ruler and prophet, Noble Drew Ali, said subordinate temple has violated any of the principles or rules of the Moorish Science Temple of America. In testimony whereof I have hereunto subscribed my name and affixed the seal of the said Moorish Science Temple of America. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam, Moors? And and on here as our landmarks we have what we refer to as the 10 wonders of the world, which are the 10 emblems that you see going around, which tell their own story. Islam, Moors? Now, why did I demonstrate the chart? I deem it only appropriate that we demonstrate the chart, especially in this month of July, right? We're post what they call the Europeans' Independence Day, right? Independence Day was when the Europeans declared their independence from the British Crown. Islam? But when did the Moorish Americans declare their independence from the marks of Negro, black, colored, and Ethiopian?
1863.
Let's go Moorish Science Temple of America. When was the Moorish Science?
1913.
Our authority.
1928, Cook County, I'm sorry.
July 20th. Islam?
July.
That is Moorish Independence Day, referred to as Moorish Authority Day.
Right.
Islam? That's when we receive our authority. Islam? How important is authority? Islam? You don't know what authority is. You don't know. You don't have the principles of governance. Right? It was deemed by the European doctors of the law in ancient times, right? Going back a few centuries, that the Negro and what was done to the Moorish people rendered them incapable of demonstrating government. Islam? They demonstrated a degree because these Europeans were Freemasons, right? There's a degree in the European Freemasonry where they talk about a master builder named Heru Ranesi. Okay? They called Heru Ranesi the master builder. Islam? What land was Heru Ranesi from? Our brother Hiram. Brother Hiram was from the land of Canaan, right? He demonstrated in the cities of Tyre and Sidon, right? Where, and in those regions where the stones were cut for the temple without the sound of hammer or axe, so they say. Islam? But that whole story, that whole drama that they demonstrate when they give that story, right? They're talking about you. Islam? They talk about 3 ruffians named Jubela, Jubelo, and Jubelum. The prefix to all of those words is the word Jew. The 3 Jews. Islam? They rendered 3 blows upon this master. The final blow was the death blow, right? This was the blow that rendered him unconscious, right? They took him and buried him in a shallow grave at the base of a mountain called Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah in Hebrew means the mountain of rebellion. Islam buried him in a shallow grave because they wanted to go back later and get the body and bury him for real, but they didn't have the time. So they placed what they call a sprig of acacia there, right? So they will remember where they buried that master at. Islam, this is what they did to you. They hit you at the head, upside the head, at high noon, right? In plain sight of everyone, right? Anyone see the movie Hancock with Will Smith? Will Smith posed a question in that movie. He said, what kind of low life must I have been? I'm paraphrasing. What kind of low life must I have been that I was in the hospital for over 100 years, you know, in a coma, and nobody came and checked on me? Islam? When you look at the end of the Moorish Empire, right? Right before you lost power, what was the state that the Moors were in? Were we ruling out of our higher self? Not by far. Islam? The prophet gave a caveat, he gave a warning. He said, I gotta be careful how I wake y'all Moors up, because y'all might mess around going on and tap something. Right? And once you find out that you're not Negro, black, colored, Ethiopian, African American, Latino, none of that, right? One of the first things you're gonna ask is, where's my birthright? Where's my land at? Where's my name at? Where's my divine creed at? Where's my mystery schools at? All my sciences and everything. Where's all of that at? Right? Because you know when the Moorish Empire was overthrown, the various different ones that we governed over carved out nations for themselves. Okay? So what you see now is the Iraq and Iran and Egypt and, you know, Libya and Tunisia and so on and so forth. These are all nations that carved themselves out of one contiguous empire. The word contiguous. I like introducing new words. Right? Contiguous. It means one unbroken whole. Contiguous. Right? You can almost see the word continual in there. Contiguous. Right? The Moorish Empire was one contiguous empire. Right? It stretched all across northern Africa, northwestern Africa. Right? Southern Europe, North, Central, South America, and all of the adjoining islands. All of that was under this flag. Islam Moors? Columbus demonstrated when he got off the boat. Stepped onto the land, he heard the call to prayer or war from a mosque that was up in the mountains in Hispaniola that you know now as Cuba. Islam, and that the natives there, right, the original people that were there, right, dressed like the Moors he just left in Spain. Islam, this is well, that's of mine who's of Costa Rican descent. She sat in this room right now, you wouldn't know she was any different than you. She's posted pictures of her family because she just went to go visit them. And you would have thought she was on Cleveland Avenue somewhere in Atlanta. Islam, there's not an expanse of earth that your forefathers had to step and demonstrate their Moorish degrees. Islam, and the greatest cry right now between Asiatic groups is the degree of unity. Everybody wants unity. You know, I have my delegation badge on that representing unity, all right? The hand press, which is the degree of unity. Islam, all right? But there's a set way that we have to unify. Islam, can't unify as Negroes, blacks, and colors. It can't happen. We've tried it, it didn't work. Islam, because there's no covenant to bind you. There are no principles to oversee it. There are no virtues to instill that will stick generation to generation. Islam, you ever wonder why other free national groups are able to do things that we just aren't able to do and pass it down? So even to the point, even if we raise it in this generation, would the succeeding generation pick it up and continue? Islam, right? I like to draw from the Holy Instructions of Unity and the Holy Quran and the Moorish Science. Chapter 26, XXVI, the Holy Instructions of Unity. This word unity is throughout this Holy Quran and the Moorish Science of America, right? So it's not like the prophet just gave you one chapter on unity. He wants you to digest the entire body of work. And through digesting the entire body, you come out with the principles of unity. Right? Right here he gives you bullet points in this particular chapter. The holy instructions of unity. Islam, Moors?
Islam.
The gifts of the understanding are the treasures of Allah. And he appointeth to everyone his portion in what measure seem good unto himself. Right there he just gave you two aspects of study. Portion and measure. Islam, each one of you in here right now has a portion of the understanding, of the gifts of the understanding. Right? That means that each one of you has a puzzle piece to our solution. Each one of you. Islam? But that portion was provided to you by Allah through knowing the essence of your spirit. Through knowing what your spirit incarnated here to do. Islam? Because each one of you came through your parents for a particular reason. Your spirit chose those particular parents. You think your father and mother just happened to like each other? Just happened to walk in that room and seen her from across the room. I need to go ask her for a phone number. You think it just happened like that? Or was there an inspiration? And if there was an inspiration, where did the inspiration come from? Right? This is guided by the great God Allah. Right? And when we were a part of that, see, there's a word in the tongue of your forefathers of Arabic called nahnu. Everyone, nahnu. Nahnu means we. Okay? So, it's the entire body, right, that would be in this room right now as an example. Islam? When you're in the state of nahnu, anna, which is the word for I, doesn't even enter into the picture. You don't even know I yet. You can't know it because you have nothing to compare it to. Islam? You don't adopt I until you start to slow down in vibration. Then you start the illusion is created that you're separate from the we. Islam? Let's push forward. Verse 2. Hath he endowed thee with wisdom? Hath he enlightened thy mind with the knowledge of truth? Communicated to the ignorant for their instruction. Communicated to the wise for thine own improvement. Islam? So that first part of the second sentence, that communicated to the ignorant, the prophet is charging you. He's putting an obligation on you. Right? So this movement and these lessons and these degrees are not designed for you to study and keep to yourself. There's a show that comes on, I think it's the Learning Channel, called Hoarders. You seen this? These people, they just collect stuff. Right? Family comes, why don't you throw this away? I can't. They'll have like a psychotic break if they have to give away something. Islam. And this is what our people have become, hoarders. We're hoarders of knowledge. We're hoarders of finance. If Allah is giving you the portion of understanding, measure that seemed good unto himself to be blessed with the knowing finance, real estate, for example. Would you, once you establish yourself, would you reach behind and pull one up of your pedigree and teach those sciences to them? Or would you just keep it unto yourself, into your small soul? Islam? All right? This is part of the Negro condition. This is why this is being done. Islam? And then it says, communicate it to the wise for thine own improvement. Right? For you to grow, you must keep yourself around people that are equal or greater than you. Which means you got to put your ego in check. Right? Even if you think you know it all, which is impossible. Especially under the cumbrous shackles of the flesh. Right? You have to put yourself around ones who are at least where you're trying to get to. Islam? Don't be that self-taught scholar. Don't be him. Don't be her. You know? Come and sit at the feet of someone and be taught. You know? In the Moorish Science of America, we refer to this right here as the sacred groves. Right? And there's a chapter 3, where it talks about, you know, one sitting in the sacred groves and being taught. Islam? Because those instructions have to come from somewhere. They have to come from ones that have been on the journey longer than you. They can tell you what to expect. They can see the bumps and the holes that you're about to fall into. Right? The Prophet also gives us a degree called the pretended wise. There are those that pretend to be wise. Right? We're going to get into that. Verse 3. True wisdom is less presuming than folly. True wisdom is not glamorous. It ain't shiny. You don't have a shiny suit on. It ain't fly. It ain't. True wisdom, you would almost overlook it if you didn't know what you were looking for. Right? The wise man doubteth often and changeth his mind. The fool is obstinate and doubteth not. He knoweth all things but his own ignorance. Islam? The pride of emptiness is an abomination. And to talk much is the foolishness of folly. He's warning you of extremes. So there are those that don't want to know anything. And there are ones that just talking all the time, right? And they have pride in things that are of no worth. Babbling. Islam? And the process of them doing that, if you're not talking about something that's on the sure foundation, you're only using the tongue to destroy. That's all you could be doing, right? Be careful of idle speech. Islam, if you're talking, what you're talking about. You ain't talking about nation building. You ain't talking about the salvation of your people. If you ain't talking about, boy, let's study together. Let's get on our degrees. Let's get on our lessons. Islam, if you ain't talking about, let's get out there and help those that need help, right? Or defending those that need defense, right? If you're not talking about any of that, be silent. Islam, and reflect, because reflection is the business of man. In the sense of his state, his first duty, or her first duty. Islam, verse 5, yet be not puffed up in thine own conceit, neither boast of superior understanding. The clearest human knowledge is but blindness and folly. That one verse alone, if you've mastered it, you could go around and unify the nation. Islam? Because conceit, that arrogance, that self-assuredness, is what makes people think that they're that individual savior. Islam, which is not confirmed by any work, it's not confirmed by any prophecy from our forefathers. Nothing handed down confirms that you are that, because if you are that, then demonstrate it. Islam, if you wiser than a prophet of Allah, then demonstrate the degree. Islam. But if you're not, guess what you have to do? You got to fall in. Fall in behind the one that does that. Whoever the appointed one was for that time, right? You got to fall in behind. The last prophet for these days and times is no neutrality. Period. Islam? Verse 6. The wise man feeleth his imperfections and is humble. He laboreth in vain for his own approbation. But the fool peepeth in the shadow stream of his own mind, and is pleased with the pebbles which he seeth at the bottom. He bringeth them up and showeth them as pearls, and with the applause of his brethren delighteth himself. Islam? Don't be arrogant, Moors. Don't be arrogant. That's how we fell. Arrogance. The Moorish elders, Moorish American elders, passed down that the reason why the Moorish American forefathers, the Moorish ancient forefathers, the Moorish ancient fathers fell was because they forgot the first aspect of their divine creed, which is that there is no God but Allah. Islam? Now granted, where is the nearest place to meet Allah? But that's not the only place. Islam? And it's not just in your heart. Islam? So yes, you have divinity within you, but so is the one that you might have fallen out of conjunction with. Allah is in them too. Islam? And you got to find that aspect of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice in them to vibrate on, right? Focus on that. The commonalities, not the differences. We can do differences all day long, all day, every day. Islam? Right? But can you empty your cup? It's said that the wise man can act like a fool, but a fool can act like a wise man. Islam? So why, if you have to meet with a group of people to demonstrate unity, why do you have to spill out everything that you know, trying to impress? Empty your cup, because there might be something in what they're demonstrating this for you. That's why the prophet bound us to not speak radical or agitating against other organized groups, right? Nor against the church, nor any negative assertions against the American flag. Islam? Because you'll be surprised where your allies come from. Islam? I have a very close friend of mine that is a Christian minister, right? And we go into the workshop of the mind where things are made of thought, the land of fleshless things. And we're able to talk about things with each other that sometimes we're not able to talk about with our congregations. Islam? Things relative to unity and wanting to move in certain directions, but it's not time, right? And I'm not saying it's not time by way of nature and what, the political landscape is showing us, because it's definitely past time relative to that, right? But it's not time with the state that we're in. I'm known to kind of be a little antisocial. I'm not the hangout guy, right? And I'm not interested in hanging out with a bunch of Asiatics just for the sake of hanging out. If we're not building this, if we're not being this full time, I almost don't want to be around you. Not from an arrogant perspective, but because I know what I'll descend into, right? Just kicking it. I don't have time to just kick it. We nation builders, right? How much time do you think, how much spare time do you think Prophet Noble Drawley had? You look at his timeline, there's a book called, I think it's called The Savior of Humanity by Brother Isaiah Hopkins Bay, Grand Sheik, Divine Minister, Temple 11, Philadelphia. You obtain the book, he gives you the timeline when the prophet was setting up temples. Brother Raphael, could you confirm or deny with a shake of the head? Is that the name of the book, Savior of Humanity? Islam. Savior, right, Amazon, correct? Savior of Humanity. Isaiah Hopkins Bay. One of our brothers, and if the brother's looking, a big Islam to our brother, we're on Facebook Live. So, it's a shame to be ignorant. There he hath no understanding. Right? There's a phenomenal interview that's out right now on Vlad TV. I feel kind of crazy giving Vlad TV a buzz, but the interview was incredible with our brother, Dr. Wesley Muhammad. I don't know if anybody's seen it. He did a phenomenal, I think it was like 50 minutes, attacking Negro culture. Things that have cropped themselves up in our community that we've become tolerant of. Islam, where we party to insanity, you know, where our children, our babies have to turn on the radio now and hear songs about Percocets, Molly Percocet. They gotta hear that. They gotta hear that in the hook. As though that's something, because you know, when you're entertained, right, that's the best time to program somebody, because your defenses are down. Islam, you know, you're in that alpha wave state, you relax, you know, you jam, you dance, you're doing whatever you're doing, right? But the whole while you're being programmed, right? Now, granted, there may be some of us that may be strong enough to not pop some Percocets, you know, for leisure, right? But what about the 15 to 16-year-old brother or sister who don't have that mental defense, that mechanism to ward off what we call psychic self-defense? The ones that don't have that, they're wide open. So they're being programmed with this, right? The brother always, definitely talked about on the interview about marijuana usage, right? He talked about how this what they call it, loud and kush and all these. He actually gave the military names for them because it was created by the U.S. Chemical Corps. NA-such and such and such and such. The chemical that they genetically altered the marijuana to increase the THC count in it. And when you increase the THC count in marijuana, it makes abundant the estrogen in the body, right? For men, and testosterone in women. So now all this now where I'm 44, I look at the hip hop scene now and I'm like, there's no way in the 90s you could have got Rakim to put a dress on. Chuck D, oh, you put this dress on, we make you. He might have punched him out. Islam? But why now? It's everywhere. Islam? There's something called terraforming, where they can systematically seed either an environment or someone's body with chemicals that literally take you away from the divine aspect of what Allah created you to be. Frankensteins. This is what the Negro has become. Islam? All right? Moving forward. Verse 8. Even in the path of wisdom, he toileth after folly, and shame and disappointment are the reward of his labor. 9. But the wise man cultivates his mind with knowledge. The improvements of the arts is his delight, and their utility to the public crowneth with honor. If you ever take the chance, take time, and look up the definition of civilization. That is basically the definition of civilization, right? Because if you ever want to see the degree of civilization that a people has, look at their arts. Islam, and that's music, that's actual, paintings, that's all of that. You put it all together, that tells you the internal monologue of the people. It tells you what's going on inside of them. Islam? Now that being the case, look at the art, look at what we're putting out into the world in our sleep state, right? Back in the 80s, I was a martial arts fanatic. I love all the martial arts. Shaw Brothers, this and that, 5 Deadly Venoms. Y'all kind of young, I don't know nothing about that. But through watching all those movies, which, we had something in New Jersey called, Black Belt Theater, which I think it was like 12 o'clock before on Saturday, all day play nothing but martial arts movies. it was excellent propaganda in that growing up, subsequent to watching those movies, I thought that all Chinese people knew martial arts. I had a subconscious paranoia about Chinese people because I was like, man, you don't want to run up on him. He could jump like 40 feet in the air. You know, spin around and kick your head off. Islam? Now, if it works that way, let's reverse the action. If we take our brother Tyler Perry, who's always in a dress, and those movies go out worldwide, when brothers in China look at him, what do they think about the Asiatic man in America? What do they think about the state that you're in? They think you're a joke and unreal. Islam? All right? So that's why the arts are so important. You know, we have a brother here right now who's producing songs left and right. You know, and I just had a song with him earlier. I just had a conversation with him earlier about can we get those pressed into an album so, you know, we can get those out because Moorish Americans need their own music. We have to divest and stop listening to the mess that's creating Negroes. Islam? We got to stop tolerating it, Morris. We got to stop tolerating it. You know what I'm saying? And I know we all got, you know, a playlist that I know I ain't got no business listening to this, but it's out. And they get you with the track. I get it. You know, we kindred. I got melanin too. I got it, right? But speaking from the highest aspect, the highest plane of spirit life, right? We got to stop doing this because all we're doing is catering and co-signing destruction, right? And the ones that are seeking your wisdom, how you gonna guide them if you on what they on? See, there's a teaching that says, some say, well, you got to get on their level to teach them. Chapter 9 in the Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America says that Jesus sat with courtesans, thieves, and drunkards. He sat with them, right? He didn't do all the things they did. Just because he sat with thieves, he didn't go steal with them. Islam? You know, just because he sat with courtesans, that don't mean he partook in that. Islam? When he was demonstrating with them, he demonstrated the principle of love because these ones were the rejected stone. Right? He came to remind them that you must now become the headstone in the corner. Islam? Don't worry about those priests that dress themselves up in fancy robes. That are shrewd enough to cover themselves with a tinsel coat of reputation. Don't worry about them. Right? Your blood is just as precious as theirs. Islam? So you cannot do what they do and guide them. They need a greater example. And I don't mean a condescending example. I don't mean you rolling up on your high camel talking about I'm so Moorish. I don't mean that. Right? But I mean by being so much of the message that you bring that they say, I want to be a part of that. Right? One of the most common questions is when you're walking the line of justice, right? Want to look at you and say, excuse me, if they're really into it, you Muslim? They'll automatically give you, why do they automatically go to Islam? Right? There's something in the way that your forefathers demonstrated spreading Islam or Islamism around the world where it's universally and globally recognized. Right? As an Egyptian proverb that says, woe to the student that does not surpass his master. We have not even equaled noble duality, let alone surpassed. Islam? Right? But it takes discipline within ourselves to become that in order to give that to those who need it the most. We can't get mad at the people because they're not getting it. The prophet gives us a measure in the divine order. We close every temple meeting. If the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. Islam? They'll never get a chance to meet Noble Drew because he passed form in 1929. They'll never get a chance to press his hand, give him a hug, tell him directly, thank you, Holy Prophet, for what you've done for us. Never. They meet the Holy Prophet through you. Islam? They see Noble Drew Ali through you. That light, that indomitable spirit that radiates through your eyes, yet surrounded and cloaked in a spirit of love. Islam? That is the spirit of the prophet that they'll meet. If you put that out there first, you'll gather the masses unto you. Islam? No spookism involved. It's real big. It says, verse 10, nevertheless, the attainment of virtue he accounteth as the highest learning, and the science of happiness is the study of his life. Right? So of all the things that Moors seek to study, Moors study astrology, Moors study numerology, Moors study masonry, Moors study all types of stuff. And I know them, you know, our nation is split about Moors and masonry. We're not gonna have that argument tonight. Right? But the point is, there are Moors that know about it. Islam? There are Moors that know that there's 33 degrees in the Scottish Rite, and that you have 33 vertebrae in your spine. And there's a connection there. Islam? But the point is, you don't have to go there to get that. You come right here and get that. And more. Islam? But the point is, right, of all those things that you could study, the highest aspect of learning that you could study is virtue. Right? And if you do a study on virtue, that's something you think you know. Well, Google virtue. Or Google the virtues. Make it plural. And it opens a whole nother field of study. Islam? The Prophet Noble Drew Ali never wasted words. Being the master that he was, if he put you on to something, it opens a whole nother volume of study. Islam? Last week we demonstrated from the Dred Scott case. Dred Scott case, we demonstrate that because the Prophet gives us a key when he talks about the Moors that were placed on the Moors of the Northwest. You know, the Moors was Negro, black, colored, and Ethiopian. Islam? When you study the Dred Scott case, you unfold it fully, you get the law behind that key. Islam? So what I do is, I didn't get a chance to make copies this week for you all, but if you come next week, I'll make sure I have those. Islam Moors? And those who weren't here last week, we have a couple copies of what we drew from last week on the back table. All right? So I'll start at the last paragraph from that, and then I'll go into the new measure. Right? Last paragraph, again, Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857 AD. Right? In this paragraph we're drawing from, it says, thus Massachusetts in 1786 passed a law similar to the colonial one of which we have spoken. The law of 1786, like the law of 1705, forbids the marriage of any, again using their language, white person with any Negro, lowercase, Indian, uppercase, or mulatto, and inflicts a penalty of 50 pounds upon any such one who shall join them in marriage, and declares all such marriages absolutely null and void, and degrades thus the unhappy issue of marriage, of the marriage, by fixing upon it the stain of bastardy. And this mark of degradation was renewed and again impressed upon the race in the careful and deliberate preparation of their revised code published in 1836. This code forbids any person from joining in marriage any white person with any Indian, Negro, or mulatto, and subjects the party who shall offend in this respect to imprisonment not exceeding 6 months in the common jail or to hard labor, and to a fine not less than 50 nor more than $200. $200 in the 1700s, more, that was some money. Islam. And like the law of 1786, it declares the marriage to be absolutely null and void. It will be seen that the punishment is increased by the code upon the person who shall marry them by adding imprisonment to the pecuniary penalty. The pecuniary means the financial. So too in Connecticut, we refer more particularly to the legislation of this state, because it was not only among the first to put an end to slavery within its own territory, but it was the first to fix a mark of reprobation upon the African slave trade. The law last mentioned was passed in October 1788, about 9 months after that state had ratified and adopted the present Constitution of the United States. And again, what I'm reading from this, you guys don't have that copy. Okay? And by that law, it prohibited its own citizens under severe penalties from engaging in the slave trade, and declared all policies of insurance on the vessel or cargo made in the state to be null and void. But up to the time of the adoption of the Constitution, there is nothing in the legislation of the state indicating any charge of opinion as to the relative rights and position of the whites and black races in this country, or indicating that it meant to place the latter, when free, upon a level with the citizens, right? So what they're demonstrating right there is the fact that in the state of Negro, black, colored, Ethiopian, etc., right, there is nothing in those marks that qualifies you for citizenship. There's nothing in what the founders of the Constitution, right, demonstrated as law that would qualify Negroes as being citizens. Islam? And certainly nothing would have led the slaveholding states to suppose that Connecticut designed to claim for them the new Constitution, the equal rights and privileges and ranks of the citizens in every other state. The first step taken by Connecticut upon this subject was as early as 1774. When were the marks placed upon the Moors of the Northwest? 1774. So that year is mentioned in the Dred Scott case. when it passed an act forbidding the further importation of slaves into the state. Another area where the prophet mentioned 1774 is when he talks about the Constitution that has never been changed. He takes you back to 1774. He said, because there's no need for you to apply to the 14th and 15th Amendment, because that was designed to place the Europeans who were outside the body of power after the Civil War, right, who had their rights to vote, suspended and all that type of stuff, to bring them back into the body of power as citizens. So that wasn't for you, right? The prophet took you back to the first Constitution, which was drafted in 1774, right, wherein in there they admitted that they should abandon the slave trade. It was immoral, it was reprehensible, so on and so forth, but they knew ones were in business behind it, so they couldn't just cut it without rebellion. Right? So they gave them until 1808, right? And after 1808, there will be no more further importation of ones from, from the African continent. Islam says, but the section containing the prohibition is introduced by the following preamble. And this is the 17, for those taking notes, the 1774 Constitution of Connecticut. This is in the preamble. It says, and whereas the increase of slaves in this state is injurious to the poor and inconvenient, because wherever you have an abundance of slave labor, one's working for free, a working man cannot compete with that. Okay? It says, this recital would appear to have been carefully introduced in order to prevent any misunderstanding of the motive which induced the legislator to pass the law, and places it distinctly upon the interest and convenience of, again, their language, the white population, excluding the inference that it might have been intended in any degree for the benefit of the other. And in the Act of 1784, by which the issue of slaves born after the time therein mentioned were to be free at a certain age, the section is again introduced by a preamble assigning a similar motive for the act. It is in these words, this is in the Act of 1784, whereas sound policy requires that the abolition of slavery should be effected as soon as may be consistent with the rights of individuals and the public safety and welfare, showing that the right of property in the master was to be protected, and that the measure was one of policy and to prevent the injury, which is a legal term, and inconvenience to the whites of a slave population in the state. Islam, you read the Articles of Confederation, which is another early form of the Constitution, right? In the Articles of Confederation, which it gets into later, it says that there are to be, in this new country that's being established, new nation I should say, there are to be no vagabonds, paupers, or fugitives from justice within these dominions. Vagabonds, paupers, or fugitives from justice. Islam? Remember that language. And still further pursuing its legislation, we find that in the same statute passed in 1774, which is also the year the Articles of Association were enshrined, which prohibited the further importation of slaves into the state, there is also a provision by which any Negro, lowercase, Indian, or mulatto servant who was found wandering out of town or place to which he belonged without a written pass, such as is therein described, was made liable to be seized by any before the next authority to be examined and delivered up to his master. Right? I don't know if y'all remember in elementary school when you had to go to the bathroom during class. Excuse me, teacher, I gotta go to the bathroom. The teacher had to write you a hall pass, right? So that way, if any teacher was in the hallway, they ask you, what are you doing in the hallway? You show your pass. Because you're demonstrating as a minor, you're not mature enough to demonstrate, the principles of civilization to be where you're supposed to be at all times. So you need a written pass that states, that you have the okay to travel, right? And this is the incapacity the Asiatics found themselves at as Negroes, blacks, and colors. Islam? And that term, examine, to be examined. Because there were certain ones that upon examination, they were able to demonstrate their Moorish heritage. And the ones that were able to do such were set free, or was able to be ransomed out, right? But if you were one, and I ask you, what's your name? And you give me John. Well, what's your surname? I don't have one. Because the slaves at that point didn't have surnames. That came later. Right? Okay. You can't be a free man. Islam, what's your religion? Well, praise Jesus. I'm You just fell under, European jurisdiction. Islam? All right. Moving forward. So remember that term, examine or examination. Right? It says who was required to pay the charge which had accrued thereby. And a subsequent section of the same law provides that if any free Negro shall travel without such pass and shall be stopped, seized, or taken up, he shall pay all the charges arising thereby. Right? So, if even the free Negro didn't qualify for the Fourth Amendment, which stops illegal search and seizures. Islam? Because he wasn't able to apply it to the Constitution because he's still a free Negro. All right? Says, and this law was in full operation when the Constitution of the United States was adopted and was not repealed until 1797. So that up to that time, free Negroes and mulattoes associated with servants and slaves in the police regulations established by the laws of the state. So this is what Asiatics are finding themselves in now, the harsh police policies, right? Because they're still under the same slave condition, the same slave labels as their forebears were, as our forefathers were, right? So the same laws that applied then apply now, why you must proclaim your nationality and your divine creed. You recognize the government in which you live and the nations of the earth. Islam? And again, in 1833, this is an important case. Okay? We're going to go into it a little bit. Write down May 24th, 1833. Because again, we don't want you to believe anything we're saying. We want you to check this out.
What's that date again?
Yes, sir. May 24th, 1833. And again, in 1833, Connecticut passed another law. Now, real quick, side, that law was literally called the Black Law. Not the Black Codes, that's different.
Yeah, I know.
But write down the Black Law and research it. We're gonna get to it. Which made it penal or crime to set up or establish any school in that state for the instruction of, specific terminology here, persons of the African race. That is what is known as an ambiguous term. There's no specificity in that term. Gives you no pedigree, no national descent, no citizenship, no subject status under a monarch, nothing. Persons of the African race. What nation is that? What's the flag of the African race? There is none. Islam? This is how you can creep in Negro, Black, and color. Right? For the instructions of persons of the African race, not inhabitants of the state, or to instruct or teach in any such school or institution or board or harbor for that purpose, any such person without the previous consent in writing of the civil authority of the town in which such school or institution might be. You know, most HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, were set up for the children of slaveholders who had children by Asiatic women. So the children who are of mixed birth, right, their children would have an education. That's what that was originally set up for. So was the curriculum, right? So the curriculum, and this is not throwing shade on HBCUs, right? But if you look at the funding, how the funding comes down, so on and so forth, you know, all you gotta do is follow the money, and it'll tell you what it's all about. Islam? The only one that was actually founded by Asiatics here in Atlanta was Morris Brown, and they lost their accreditation and just got it back after all these years, right? You know. But moving forward, it says, and it appears by the case, now this is the case at May 24th, 1833. Write this down. Crandall, C-R-A-N-D-A-L-L, Crandall versus the state, okay? Specifically, it's Crandall versus Connecticut state, the state of Connecticut, okay? That upon an information filed against Prudence Crandall for a violation of this law, one of the points raised in the defense was that the law was a violation of the Constitution of the United States, and that the persons instructed, although of the African race, were citizens of other states, and therefore entitled to the rights and privileges of the citizens in the state of Connecticut. But Chief Justice Daggett, before whom the case was tried, held that persons of that description were not citizens of a state, within the meaning of the word citizen in the Constitution of the United States, and were not therefore entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens in other states. And again, this is ones of Negro, Black, colored, Ethiopian status. Islam? All right? And Prudence Crandall was an abolitionist. And she formed a school, in her words, to instruct colored girls of African descent. Right? And people in the town almost lost their minds. Right? It was a big uproar. Right? So it was court cases and all this kind of stuff filed. It said the case was carried up to the Supreme Court of errors of the state. So that was how they framed the wording of the case. Errors of the state. So they knew that the case was flawed from its inception, but they still had to try it through anyway. And the question fully argued there. But the case went off upon another point and no opinion was expressed on this question. We have made this particular examination, that word again, into the legislative and judicial action of Connecticut, because from the early hostility it displayed to the slave trade on the coast of Africa, we may expect to find the laws of that state as lenient and favorable on the subject race as those of any other state in the Union. And if we find that at the time of the Constitution was adopted, they were not even there raised to the rank of citizens, but were still held and treated as property, and the laws relating to them passed with reference altogether to the interest and convenience of the white race, we shall hardly find them elevated, it's an interesting term, you should write it down, elevated to a higher rank anywhere else. Islam? So citizens at that time knew the condition of the Negro and said, well, because they're in that condition, we don't see them raised to any other rank in government. We don't see it. Citizen, let alone holding government. A brief notice of the laws of 2 other states, and we shall pass on to other considerations. By the laws of New Hampshire, collected and finally passed in 1815, no one was permitted to be enrolled in the militia of the state, but free white citizens. Remember, white is a class status. It's not a color, right? The law did not deal with color status, just like black is a class status. Islam? Free white citizens, but don't go around calling yourself white people. Don't pick that up. There are Moors that do that. Yeah. You're not white people. Islam, it's a class status, right? But if you fall in as Moorish American, you fall in as citizen, right? And that is enough, as far as the law is concerned, right? Then you have the rights and duties of a citizen. Now you got to perform the acts of a citizen. It says, and the same provision is found in a subsequent collection of the laws made in 1855. Nothing could strongly mark, there's that word again, mark the entire repudiation of the African race. The alien is excluded because by being born in a foreign country, he cannot be a member of the community until he is naturalized. But why are the African race born in the state not permitted to share in one of the highest duties of the citizen? Paying the tax, the vote, all of that is high duty of a citizen. That's high duty, right? The answer is obvious. He is not, by the institution and laws of the state, numbered among its people. He forms no part of the sovereignty of the state and is not therefore called upon to uphold and defend it. Islam? Again in 1822, Rhode Island, in its revised code, passed a law forbidding persons who were authorized to join persons in marriage from joining in marriage any white person, any Negro, lowercase, Indian or mulatto, under the penalty of $200 and declaring all such marriages absolutely null and void. And the same law was again reenacted in the revised code of 1844, so that down to the last mentioned period, the strongest mark, there's that word again, of inferiority and degradation was fastened upon the African race in that state, right? See, so morally, when we look at the Ku Klux Klan, or the Knights of the Golden Circle, right, or the Night Riders, right, all these, Masonic groups, right, European Masonic groups, who enforce the law upon the Asiatics who are out of law, right? Morally, we looked at, well, it was wrong what they did, whatever. They were standing on law, the laws of the time. Islam? Just like right now, you're in the Moorish Science Temple of America learning law. Islam? They would come together in the Ku Klux Klan, they have something known as a clavern, right? Clavern is like a grotto or a particular, setting when their charter is raised, right? Where they're bound by certain laws, right? And there, when you become a Klansman, you have to take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. You have to demonstrate the degree of the citizen, right? For those taking notes, write down the Kloran, K-L-O-R-A-N. In some instances, some publish, some editions, they call it the Holy Kloran. Like Nobles Riley gave you the Holy Koran, the Ku Klux Klan Holy Text is called the Holy Kloran, right? And all their officers start with the KL prefix, the Grand Clycops, Clykos, so on and so forth. Islam, Klan was resurrected in the year 1916, right? Because you know they were disbanded in the 1800s. 1960, they came back. Where? What city in America? Stone Mountain, Georgia. Right here.
Right here.
Look at the mountain. What's carved on the side of the mountain? Confederate soldiers. Now, they rebelled, lost their citizenship, lost the war, and had to be militarily brought back into the constitutional fold. But those Confederate soldiers are still cut into the side of that mountain. Islam, and you will be fool to think of yourself that the Klan is not very much alive in this day and time, especially with the current presidential administration. Islam, get your act together, Moors. They organized. They've been organized. They got principles. They've been the principles that the Klan is operating on. They've been operating on since its founding in the 1800s. Right? The principles of the Moorish Science of America is operating on. We've been operating on since 1913. So Allah sent a divine prophet to get you on the foundation to counteract what the Europeans were organized to do against you. That's why nationality is important. That's why honoring this man, Prophet Noble Raleigh, is important. Islam, it would be impossible to enumerate and compress in the space usually allotted to an opinion of a court the various laws marking, notice that word all through, the condition of this race. Sister Sasha, could you do me a favor? Go to Google, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, okay? And let's get condition, okay? And let me know when you got it. The condition of this race, which were passed from time to time after the Revolution, and before and since the adoption of the Constitution of the United States. In addition to those already referred to, it is sufficient to say that Chancellor Kent, whose accuracy and research no one will question, states in the 6th edition of his commentaries, you should write the name down so you can do that research. Chancellor Kent, Chancellor is spelled C-H-A-N-C-E-L-L-O-R, Chancellor Kent, K-E-N-T. Right, Chancellor Kent's commentaries, published in 1848, Volume 2, 258, Note B, that in no part of the country except Maine did the African race in point of fact participate equally with whites in the exercise of civil and political rights. So there were liberal Europeans who allowed, through a certain privilege, ones of Negro, black, and colored status, to exercise, political affairs, right? But they allowed them to do that. They really didn't have the right for it. They allowed them to do it. The legislation of the states shows, in a manner not to be mistaken, the inferior and subject condition of that race at the time the Constitution was adopted, and long afterwards throughout 13 states by which that instrument was framed, and it is hardly consistent with the respect due to these states to suppose that they regarded at that time as fellow citizens and members of the sovereignty a class of beings whom they had stigmatized, whom as we are bound, is that word again, out of respect to the state sovereignties to assume that they had deemed it just and necessary. That's a constitutional phrase, right? There's a phrase, necessary and proper. It's a constitutional clause, right? There's a legal maxim, necessitas non habet legem, which means that necessity has no laws. So if you listen to the news and you hear them say, it is necessary for us to send federal troops into Chicago. Do you hear that? It's a kill order, period. Ain't no negotiation, we gonna sit down and have a meeting, ain't no light no candles, ain't no singing no songs. It's laying everybody down. Islam, Sister Savage, you have condition?
I do.
You mind reading, demonstrate that?
In civil law, the situation, condition. In civil law, the situation of every person in some one of the different orders of persons which compose the general order of society and allot to each person therein a distinct separate rank, dominant, tome, and that's title. Also, a paction or agreement which regulates that which the contractors have a mind should be done of a case which they foresee should come to pass. And casual conditions are such as depend upon accident and are in no wise in the power of the person in whose favor the obligation is entered into. Mixed conditions are such as depend upon the joint wills of the person in whose favor the obligation is contracted and of a third person, as if you marry my cousin, I will give, etc. Here. Possessive conditions are those which are in the power of the person in whose favor the obligation is contracted, as if I contract to give my neighbor a sum of money in case he cuts down a tree.
You can pause that.
Okay.
You can pause that. So you have that word condition there. The prophet comes back in chapter 7 of the Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America, verse 9, where it says, "These things we see are but reflexes just appearing, while the ethers vibrate so and so. And when the conditions change, they is conditioned." Islam family?
Islam.
Praise Allah. Praise Allah. Right? Moving forward with this Dred Scott. Says, or that when they met in convention to form the Constitution, they looked upon them as a portion of their constituents, or designed to include them in the provision so carefully inserted for the security and protection of the liberties and rights of their citizens. It cannot be supposed that they intended to secure to them rights and privileges and rank in the new political body throughout the Union, which every one of them denied within the limits of its own dominion. More especially, it cannot be believed that the large slaveholding states regarded them as included in the word citizens, or would have consented to a constitution which might compel them to receive them in that character from another state. For if they were so received and entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens, it would exempt them from the operation of the special laws and from the police regulations which they considered to be necessary for their own safety. Islam Moors? So the harsh police policies were enacted to protect citizens from the barbarity of ones that did not have a nationality. Islam Moors? So we look, again, looking at it from a moral perspective, we say, well, it's unjust what they're doing as far as the police and they're shooting brothers down the street, right? But look at how we're demonstrating in the world. Look at how we're being perceived. Look at how our actions are being looked at. Islam Moors? Ones who have the degree of citizenship and the principles of civilization, they're terrified for their lives. There's some of us that have to live next door to some insanity from some Asiatics, right? And we don't admit it, but at night, you're concerned. We're not going to put it in the realm of fear, but you're at least concerned. Islam? All right? So it says, for if they were so received and entitled to the privilege and immunity of citizens, it would exempt them from the operation of the special laws on the police regulation which they considered to be necessary for their own safety. It would give to persons of the Negro race, lowercase, who are recognized as citizens in any one state of the Union, the right to enter every other state whenever they pleased, singly or in companies with pass or passport, and without obstruction, to sojourn there as long as they please, to go where they please at every hour of the day or night without molestation, unless they committed some violation of the law for which a white man, their language, would be punished. And it would give them the full liberty of speech in public and private upon all subjects upon which its own citizens might speak, to hold public meetings upon political affairs, and to keep and carry arms whenever they want. All of this would be done in the face of a subject race of the same color, both free and slave, and inevitably produce discontent and insubordination among them, and endangering the peace and safety of the state. Islam Moors? In that previous sentence, they just gave you the description of a citizen. Those are all things that citizens do. holding public meetings, demonstrating politics, traveling unmolested, so on and so forth. All these are things that a citizen can do, right? But the argument is, are these things that we can, extend to a Negro, right? To something that's looked at as a thing according to law. Islam, Moors? It is impossible, it would seem, to believe that the great men of the slaveholding states who took so large a share in framing the Constitution of the United States and exercised so much influence in procuring its adoption could have been so forgetful or regardless of their own safety and the safety of those who trusted and confided in them. Besides this, want of foresight and care would have been utterly inconsistent with the caution displayed, and caution is indeed a watchword, in providing for the admission of new members into this political family. For when they gave to the citizens of each state the privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states, they at that time took from the several states the power of naturalization and confined that power exclusively to the federal government. No state was willing to permit another state to determine who should or should not be admitted as one of its citizens, and entitled to demand equal rights and privileges with one accord, surrendered by the states and confided to the federal government. And this power granted to Congress to establish a uniform rule of naturalization is, by well understood meaning of the word, confined to persons born in a foreign country under a foreign government. It is not a power to raise to the rank of citizen anyone born in the United States who, from birth or parentage by the laws of the country, belongs to an inferior and subordinate class. And when we find in the states guarding themselves from the indiscreet and improper admission by other states of immigrants from other countries by giving the power exclusively to Congress, we cannot fail to see that they could not have left with the states a much more important power. That is, last page, the power of transforming into citizens a numerous class of persons who in that character, that word comes up in the definition of nationality, would be much more dangerous to the peace and safety of a large portion of the Union than the few foreigners of one of the states who might improperly naturalize. The Constitution, upon its adoption, obviously took from the states all power and any subsequent legislation to introduce as a citizen into the political family of the United States anyone, no matter where he was born or what might be his character or condition, and it gave to Congress the power to confer this character upon those only who were born outside of the dominions of the United States, and no law of the state therefore passed since the Constitution was adopted can give any right of citizenship outside of its own territory. A clause similar to the one in the Constitution in relation to the rights and immunities of citizens of one state in the other states was contained in the Articles of Confederation. But there is a difference of language which is worthy of note. The provision in the Articles of Confederation was that, quote, that the free inhabitants of each of the states, paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice excepted, should be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of free citizens in the several states. It will be well observed, under this confederation, each state had the right to decide for itself and in its own tribunals whom it would acknowledge as a free inhabitant of another state. The term free inhabitant, in the generality of its terms, would certainly include one of the African race who had been manumitted. The word manumit means to open the hand, in the sense of free. But no example, we think, can be found of his admission to all the privileges of citizenship in any state of the Union after these articles were formed, and while they were continued in force, and notwithstanding the generality of the words free inhabitants, it is very clear that, according to their accepted meaning in that day, they did not include the African race, whether free or not. For the 5th section of the 9th article provides that Congress should have the power, quote, to agree upon the number of land forces to be raised and to make requisitions from each state for its quota in proportion to the number of white inhabitants in such state which requisition should be binding, unquote. Islam Moors? Last paragraph. Words could hardly have been used which more strongly mark, word again, the line of distinction between citizen and the subject, the free and the subjugated races, which subjugate means under the yoke. The latter were not even counted when the inhabitants of a state or to be embodied in proportion to its numbers for the general defense. And it cannot for a moment be supposed that a class of persons thus separated and rejected from those who formed the sovereignty of the states were yet intended to be included under the words free inhabitants in the preceding article, to whom privileges and immunities were so carefully secured in every state. And I'll stop there. Islam, Moors? So, although quite lengthy, and again, that's just a few pages out of the Dred-Scott case. But Moors, praise Allah.
Praise Allah is right.
Islam, Moors?
Islam.
Because again, you know, this is our holy day, and on our holy day, you know, this is definitely a day to be thankful for all that Allah has given us. Islam, of the many things, you know, the Prophet tells us, you know, of thy external parts are, you know, health, vigor, and proportion, right? What health is to the body, so is honesty to the soul, right? All right? It says health is the greatest of these, all right? So it's good to be thankful for those things, right? But can we be thankful for the angel that came and brought that lesson to us?
Come on.
Thought.
The thought of Allah manifested in the flesh. Islam, you know, manifested in human flesh. Islam, that angel didn't come to us as a spook or something. He came as one of us. You know, his nationality was Moorish American. Our nationality is Moorish American, right? So we're thankful for on our holy day, you know, for our prophet, for our holy divine prophet. Islam, Moors, because without this man, none of that language would have made sense to us, right? The citizens of America would have been demonstrating law in circles around us, as they've been doing for such time, right? And we would have had no clue what's going on. We had all the whys, but no answers. Islam, praise Allah for the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam, praise Allah for the 12-step ladder and the virtues. Islam, praise Allah for all these things. Praise Allah for Moorish American families. Islam, because we talk of this nationhood, but without family, there is no nation. Islam, speaking of a very noble Moorish American family that's just walked in the room. I'd like to give honors where honors is due. Islam, Brown-Hill family is in the house. Praise Allah. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you. Haven't seen y'all since Juneteenth. Praise Allah. All right. If I may, as soon as Sister Sarah comes up, I'd like to come up and extend further, have her come up and extend further honors, if that's okay. All right. This family right here has been doing phenomenal work, you know, extending the learning across all areas of the spectrum. All right. Not just demonstrating, you know, living the life of a Moorish American Muslim, you know, demonstrating the line through which Jesus came, the line through which justice came. Not just demonstrating and living it, right? But also going into other areas where Asiatics may be found and demonstrating how Moors move in those circles. They have their children in boxing, right? And not only do they have their children in boxing, I think we got a national champion of them, don't we, Sheik? And it's not who you think, because you would think it would be the brothers, right? It's that little sister sitting right there.
I saw him.
Praise Allah.
Praise Allah.
Islam, Sister Sarai. How are you, my wife? You well? How was everything at your last fight? I saw you jump up in the air. You got at least about 3-4 feet off the ground. I saw that. And jumping for joy. So praise Allah for that.